So welcome to Bookaccino Live for February. I can't believe it's February already. February's going really quickly. January was there in 2 seconds, but I'm like, February, okay, let's see how much we can get done. There's so many interesting books this month, so let me get right to it. First, I'm going to start with your top picks from January's presentation. First pick was The Maid, which was also the #1 New York Times bestseller last week. And we've got an interview with Nita Prose that a lot of people have listened to either on our video or podcast already. Urge you to take a listen to that. Magnolia Palace from Fiona Davis. We know you're big fans of hers. Her Hidden Genius by Marie Benedict, another author that we know is just a tried and true favorite of book reporter readers. Diane Chamberlain's The Last House on the Street, which, like The Maid, is a book reporter bets on selection. And because you love books as much as we do, the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections by Eva Jerzik. So I think that we've got a good selection. And from reading these, we get an idea of what you're really interested in when we pull these presentations together. So let's go with what's out now. First, we're going to start with fiction this time. First is Very Cold People by Sarah Manguso. It's on sale this week. So for Ruthie, the frozen town of Waitsfield, Massachusetts is all she's ever known. Once home to the oldest and most illustrious families in the country, the Cabots, the Lowells, and the first best people. By the tail end of the 20th century, it's a place awash with secrets. Ruthie's been dogged with feelings of inadequacy her whole life. Hers is no picturesque New England childhood, but one of really swap meets, factory seconds, and powdered milk. Shame blankets her like a thick snow that regularly buries nearly everything in Waitsfield. She grows older. Ruthie slowly learns how the town's prim facade conceals a deeper, darker history, and how silence often masks a legacy of harm, from the violence that runs down the family line to the horrors endured by her high school friends, each suffering a fate worse than the next. And Jhumpa Lahiri said this is one of the most original and exciting writers working in English today when she refers to Sarah. Next, we've got The Swimmers. And if this doesn't make me want to dive into a pool, into let's see, that middle lane, nobody's in it. I think that could be my lane. This is by Juliet Saku. And Colson Whitehead said, here comes a new book from Julie, a novel that we can begin to live again. So I think that's pretty good endorsement. But I still want that middle lane. So this is coming on February 22nd. The swimmers are unknown to one another, except if they're private routines: slow lane, medium lane, fast lane, and the solace each takes in their morning or afternoon laps. But when a crack appears at the bottom of the pool, they're cast out into an unforgiving world without comfort or relief. One of these swimmers is Alice, who's slowly losing her memory. For Alice, the pool was a final stand against the darkness of her encroaching dementia. Without the fellowship of her fellow swimmers and the routine of her daily laps, she's plunged into dislocation and chaos, swept into memories of her childhood and the Japanese-American incarceration camp in which she spent the war. Alice's estranged daughter, re-entering her mother's life too late, witnesses her stark and devastating decline. And for anybody who, remember when we used to leave the house, I used to swim in a Y years ago. I haven't done it in years. But people did have the routines. There were certain times of the day you knew who you were going to see, you knew who you're going to run into, you knew who was running out to work afterwards and what people were doing. So there was this camaraderie, even though you didn't know who anybody's name was. You knew this was the fast swimmer. This is the person who only walked in the slow lane. So I find the premise of this book very interesting. Next, we've got One Italian Summer coming from Rebecca Searle. And there's a little interesting tidbit about Rebecca. She was literally our last interview in the office in March 2020. We interviewed her on a Tuesday and we closed the office by Thursday. So Rebecca has that kind of moniker attached to her. So this book is on sale on March 1st. When Katie's mother dies, she's left reeling. Carol wasn't just Katie's mom, she was her best friend and her first phone call. She had all the answers. And now when Katie needs her the most, she's gone. To make matters worse, their planned mother-daughter trip of a lifetime looms to Positano, a magical town where Carol spent the summer right before she met Katie's father. Katie's been waiting years for Carol to take her, and now she's faced embarking on this adventure alone. But as soon as she steps foot on the Amalfi Coast, she begins to feel her mother's spirit. And then Carol appears in the flesh, healthy, suntanned, and 30 years old. Katie doesn't understand what's happening or how. All she can focus on is that she's somehow impossibly gotten her mother back. And over the course of one Italian summer, Katie gets to know Carol, not as her mother, but as the young woman before her. However, she's not exactly sure who she imagined Katie might be. And so Katie must reconcile the mother who knew everything with the young woman who seems to not yet have a clue. And Gabriel Zevin says, Rebecca is a maestro of love in all its forms. Her last book was In 5 Years, and it was another one with that kind of time travel kind of thing of somebody waking up and it's 5 years later, why is she with this guy? What ended up happening? So it's definitely a trope that she's really interested in working with. Now we've got The Unsinkable Greta James coming from Jennifer E. Smith. Now, look, guys, I didn't put these books back to back for anything except the dates they're coming out, because this one's on March 1st. And right after the sudden death of her mother, once again, her first and most devoted fan, and just before the launch of her high-stakes sophomore album, Greta James falls apart on stage. The footage quickly goes viral and she stops playing, her career suddenly in jeopardy. The kind of jeopardy her father, Conrad, has always predicted. Months later, Greta, still heartbroken and adrift, reluctantly agrees to accompany Conrad on the Alaskan cruise her parents had booked to celebrate their 40th anniversary. It could be their last chance to heal old wounds in the wake of shared loss. But the trip will also be a voyage of discovery for them both, and for Ben Wilder, a charming historian who is struggling with a major upheaval in his own life. It is here in the unlikeliest of places that Greta will finally confront the choices she's made, the heartbreak she's suffered, and the family hurts that run deep. So we've got two books dueling, both coming out on March 1st, that are dealing with sudden loss of parent, what ends up happening to child. I suggest reading them back to back and then comparing. Next, we're going to do historical fiction. We know this is a favorite of yours. This is The Lady's Mind, which is out from Francine Rivers. Francine is the internationally bestselling author of Redeeming Love. The movie's right now in theaters. And this book has sold, tens of millions of copies. I mean, it's just really done extremely, extremely well. And this is a standalone that she's got that's coming out, that's out this week. And I really like the time frame on this because I'm addicted right now to watching that show 1883. It's on Paramount Plus. It's by the same guy, Taylor Sheridan, that did Yellowstone. So when I see books set in that time frame now, I have a much better idea, especially when they're set out west, about what the town really looked and kind of like, I feel like I can even see what it smelled like. So it's 1875. And when Catherine Walsh arrives in tiny Calvada, a mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevadas, falling in love is the farthest thing from her mind. Banished from Boston by her wealthy stepfather, she has come to claim an inheritance from an uncle she never knew, a defunct newspaper office on a main street overflowing with brothels and saloons, and a seemingly worthless mine. Moved by the oppression of the local miners and their families, Catherine decides to relaunch her uncle's newspaper and then finds herself in the middle of a maelstrom, pitted against Calvada's most powerful men. Matthias Beck, owner of a local saloon and hotel, has a special interest in the new lady in town. He instantly recognizes C.T. Walsh's same tenacity in the beautiful and outspoken redhead, and knows all too well how dangerous that family trait can be. So while Catherine may not be right about Calvado's problems, her righteousness could also get her killed. So when the hotelier keeps finding himself on the same side of the issues as the opinionated Miss Walsh, Matthias's search for purpose becomes all about answering the call of the heart. So there we've got The Lady's Mind. Next, we've got Love and Saffron, a novel of friendship, food, and love by Kim Fay. When 27-year-old Joan Bergstrom sends a fan letter, as well as a gift of saffron, to the 59-year-old Imogene Fortier, a life-changing friendship begins. Joan lives in Los Angeles and is just starting out as a writer for the newspaper Food Pages. Imogene lives on Camano Island outside Seattle, writing a monthly column for Pacific Northwest magazine. And while she can help hunt elk and dig for clams, she's never tasted fresh garlic, exotic fare in the Northwest of the 60s. As the two women commune through their letters, they build a closeness that sustains them through the Cuban Missile Crisis, the assassination of President Kennedy, and an unexpected loss in their own lives. And because of her correspondence with Joan, Imogene's decades-long marriage blossoms into something new and exciting, and in turn, Joan loves what true love does not always come in the form we expect it to. This beautiful, intimate world comes the ultimate test of their friendship, a test that summons their unconditional trust in one another. This is Love and Saffron, a novel of friendship, food, and love. And it's like a dinner with a friend that you won't want to end. And I think that's a really great quote from J. Ryan Stradle, who is the author of Kitchens of the Great Midwest. Next, we've got The Magnificent Lives of Marjorie Post by Alison Pataki. Now, I'm going to be reading this book next, and it's not for anything about the cover, folks. It's not just because the cover is turquoise and that's my favorite color. It just sounds like I've been waiting to read this book just because the subject sounds so interesting. It's out next Tuesday, February 15th. Presidents have come and gone, but Marjorie Merriweather Post has hosted them all. Growing up in the modest farmlands of Battle Creek, Michigan, Marjorie was inspired by a few simple rules. Always think for yourself, never take success for granted, and work hard, even when deemed American royalty. From crawling through Moscow warehouses to rescue the Tsar's treasures, to outrunning the Nazis in London, from serving the homeless of the Great Depression to entertaining the Roosevelts, Kennedys, and Hollywood's biggest stars, Marjorie Merriweather Post lived an epic life few could imagine. No one could have predicted that C.W. Post's cereal company would grow into the General Foods empire and reshape the American way of life. The American way of breakfast is what I say, with Marjorie as its heiress and leading lady. Not content to stay in her role of high society wife, mother, and hostess, Marjorie dared to dream more, making history in the process. Before turning 30, she amassed millions, becoming the wealthiest woman in the United States. Her story, though full of beauty and grandeur, was equally marked by challenge and tumult. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Alison in the past. We're trying to set up something for me to talk to her about this book as well. I find that a character like this is so interesting because I had always sort of like when I was growing up, it was always the cereal was from Battle Creek, Michigan, this is da 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 da. But to sit and read the background on some of those stories where we don't do that same thing that we used to do when we were growing up, where the box of cereal would be on the table and everybody'd say, oh, you'd read anything, including the back of the box, the cereal box. People aren't doing the same kind of thing anymore. So it's fun to sit there and kind of a little retrospective of what life used to be like. Next, we've got Moon Witch Spider King from Marlon James. It's a fantasy novel, and we're including a couple of different genres in here because we know that many of you have said, oh, we'd like to hear a little bit more about X or Y or Z, and we're trying to do that. And Austin is waiting to get a date to interview Marlon as well. Besides my doing interviews with the authors these days, Austin is also doing interviews, especially in the genres that he knows best, which is fantasy, horror, and science fiction, where I am hopelessly lost, but he's hopelessly in tune with what's going on. So let's go with the book's about, coming out February 15th. And Black Leopard, Red Wolf, Solgon the Moon, which provided a worthy adversary to track her as they clashed across a mythical African landscape in search of a mysterious boy who disappeared. That was the first book in the series. This is the second one. In Moon Witch Spider King, Sogalon takes center stage and gives her own account of what happened to the boy and how she plotted and fought, triumphed and failed as she looked for him. It's also the story of a century-long feud seen through the eyes of a 177-year-old witch that Sogalon had with Aisi, chancellor to the king. It is said that Aisi works so closely with the king that together they're like 8 limbs of one spider. Aisi's power is considerable and deadly. It takes brains and courage to challenge him, which Sogalon does for reasons of her own. It's a really stunningly colorful cover. Okay, next we've got The Tobacco Wives. The Tobacco Wives is coming from Adele Myers, hearing a lot of really great things about this book. Lisa Wingate is calling it a beautifully rendered portrait of a young woman finding her courage and her voice. It's from Adele Myers. It's coming out on March 1st. Maddie Sykes is a burgeoning seamstress who just arrived in Brightleaf, North Carolina, the tobacco capital of the South, where her aunt has a thriving sewing business. After years of war rations and shortages, Brightleaf is a prosperous wonderland in full technicolor bloom, and Maddie's dazzled by the bustle of the crisply uniformed female factory workers, the palatial homes, and most of all, her aunt's glossiest clientele, the wives of the most powerful tobacco executives. But she soon learns that Brightleaf isn't quite the carefree paradise that it seems. A trail of misfortune follows many of the women, including substantial health problems. And although Maddie is quick to believe it's a coincidence, she inadvertently uncovers evidence that suggests otherwise. Maddie wants to report what she knows, but in a town where everyone depends on big tobacco to survive, she doesn't know who she can trust and she fears that exposing the truth may destroy the lives of the proud, strong women with whom she has formed such strong bonds. So there we've got the Tobacco Wives. Another great cover. Covers are really being terrific these days. And considering that everyone's working remotely, and a cover is a really tough thing to get right. You have to decide what the image is going to be, how the font is going to look, how the type is going to look, what other art is going to be there, what pull quotes are going to be up on the cover. And at the same time, you're trying to evoke exactly what the book is about. And when you look and you see something very clever like this, you're like, wait a second, it's like dead on smart. Now we're going to do some thrillers and mysteries. We're going to start with Other People's Clothes by Calla Henkel. It's on sale now. Hoping to escape the pain of a recent murder of her best friend, art student Zoe Beach finds herself studying abroad in the bohemian capital of Europe, Berlin. Rudderless, Zoe relies on the arrangements of fellow exchange student Haley Mader, who idolizes Warhol and Britney Spears and wants nothing more than to be an art star. When Haley stumbles on a posting for high-ceilinged pre-war sublet by a well-known thriller writer, Beatrice Becks, the girls snap it up. And they soon spend their nights twisting through Berlin club scene and their days hungover. But are they being watched? Convinced that Beatrice intends to use their lives as inspiration for her next novel, Haley vows to craft main character-worthy personas. They begin hosting a decadent weekly nightclub in the apartment, finally gaining the notoriety they've been craving. And as the year unravels and events spiral out of control, they begin to wonder whose story they're living and how it's going to end. So there we've got Other People's Clothes, another great cover. And we've got Gregg Hurwitz, who's back with my favorite character that I've fallen in love with, the Orphan X, Evan Smoke. Yes, Evan Smoke is Orphan X. He's a man with many identities and a challenging past. As Orphan X, who was a government assassin for the off-the-books orphan program. After he broke with the program, he adopted a new name and a new mission, the Nowhere Man, helping the most desperate in times of troubles. And he basically carries a phone rings, he answers like, how do I help? And it's not one of those listed numbers. It's when you have to be passed on from one person to the next. So we've got a kingpin of a major drug dealing operation in South Texas. He's also the patron of the local area, supplying employment in legitimate operations, providing help to the helpless, rough justice to the downtrodden, and a future to people normally with little hope. So he's complicated. Not a completely good man who does bad things often for good reasons. So, who is he? However, for all his money and power, he's helpless when one of the most vicious cartels kidnaps his innocent 18-year-old daughter, spiriting her away into the armored complex that is their headquarters in Mexico. And with no other way to rescue his daughter, he turns to the Nowhere Man. And what is Orphan X going to say at this point? Because he usually only wants to help the good. So we'll see what happens. Next, we've got The Other Family, which is by Wendy Corsi Staub. This book is going to be at Betson. I also interviewed Wendy, and that interview is up on the site right now, just out this week. What's really interesting is during the interview, besides our talking about the books, Wendy does this really great description of what is suspense, thriller, and mystery. For all of us who have always wondered how the different nomenclature goes against each of the books, she does a really great job of explaining the genres, on top of talking about The Other Family, which is pretty terrific. It's the perfect home for the perfect family. Pretty Nora Howell, her handsome husband, their 2 teenage daughters, and a lovable dog. They're California transplants making a fresh start in Brooklyn, and they expected for the money they have, they'd have to live in a shoebox. But they've got a brownstone with a huge kitchen, lots of light, and a backyard. The catch, its previous residents, they learn, were victims of a grisly triple homicide that remains unsolved. So soon peculiar things start happening. Their dog is nosing around like a bloodhound in the backyard. Nora unearths a long hidden rusty box in the flower bed. Older daughter Stacy, she's a true crime aficionado, obsessed with the family murders in their house, pokes into the bloody past and becomes convinced the stranger is watching the house, is watching them. She's right, but one of the Howells will recognize his face because one of them has a secret that will blindside the others with a truth that lies shockingly close to home, and this one's terrifying history. Really, really well done. It was a real brisk kind of read. The watcher knows who you are and what you did, and Harlan Coben is calling this great psychological suspense, guys, not thriller, suspense, with a wallop of a twist, and the wallop is definitely there. Next, we've got The Cage from Bonnie Kistler. We're going to have an interview with Bonnie going up next week, the day that this book goes on sale. It's also a bet sign. Now, let's go for the premise of this because it's really cool. On a cold, misty Sunday night, two women are alone in the offices of a fashion conglomerate, Claudine de Martineau International. I love when she came up with the name of the company. One is the company's human resources director, impeccably dressed and perfectly coiffed. She sits at her desk and stares somberly out the window. Down the hall, her colleague, one of the company's lawyers, is buried under a pile of paperwork, frantically rushing to finish. They leave at the same time, the two women, each preoccupied with their own fault, and enter the elevator that will take them down from the 30th floor. When they arrive in the lobby, one of the women is dead. Was it murder or was it suicide? And in this book, Bonnie will twist you back and forth on who did what and what did who to whom. And you cannot read the end. You just have to sit there and twist back and forth and do the kind of character assessment of what's going on. And it's just so interesting the way the whole book plays through. Bonnie's last book, House on Fire, was also a Book Reporter Bets on selection. I just really love her writing. I love the way she drops you in. And also on her website, bonniekistler.com, she's got a essay about what she doesn't like about elevators. And when I was chatting with her, my thing when we used to be in the office and we were in elevators, I always get in, and if people had lunch, I go, oh, good, if we get stuck, we've got food. Because it was always like you were looking around with who are you going to get stuck with if the elevator broke down? And I don't know why, but that was one of those recurring thoughts that was always in the back of my head of, do I want to get stuck with the people? The answer was usually no. Next, we've got Diablo, Mesa, coming from Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child, otherwise known as Preston and Child. On February 15th, this book will be out. Lucas Tappan, a wealthy and eccentric billionaire, founder of Icarus Space Systems, approaches the Santa Fe Archaeological Institute with an outlandish proposal to finance a careful scientific excavation of the Roswell incident site, where a UFO alleged to have crashed in 1947. Skeptical Nora Kelly, to her great annoyance, is tasked with the job. Nora's excavation immediately uncovers two murder victims buried at the site, faces and hands obliterated with acid to erase their identities. Special Agent Corey Swanson is assigned to the case, and as Nora's excavation proceeds, uncovering things both bizarre and seemingly inexplicable, Corey's homicide investigation throws open a Pandora's box of espionage and violence, uncovering bloody traces of a powerful force that will stop at nothing to protect its secrets, and that threatens to engulf them all in unimaginable fate. Then we got Diablo Mesa. So we've got Our American Friend from Anna Piloniak, coming on February 15th. Tired of covering grating dysfunction of Washington and the increasingly outrageous antics of President Henry Kane, the White House correspondent Sophie Morse quits her job and plans to leave politics behind. But when she gets a call from the office of the First Lady, Lara Kane, asking Sophie to come for a private meeting with Lara, her curiosity is piqued. Lara asks Sophie to write her official biography and to finally fill in the gaps of her history. Sophie begins to spend more and more time at the White House, slowly developing a bond with Lara, and eventually a deep and surprising friendship with her. Even more surprising to Sophie is the fact that Lara is entirely candid about her mysterious past. First Lady doesn't hesitate to speak about her beloved father's work as an undercover KGB officer in Paris, and how he wasn't the only person in her family working undercover during the Cold War. Sophie can't help but wonder why Lara is rehashing such sensitive information, and suddenly she is in the middle of a game of cat and mouse that can have explosive ramifications. So Kate Quinn says it's an intriguing Russian nesting doll of all modern Washington politics, Cold War spy games, and above all, women with secrets. Next, we've got Sierra 6, which is a Gray Man novel by Mark Greaney. This is a large book for my son, for my husband, that I included this book in the presentation. He and his friends are obsessed with reading Mark Greaney's book. In fact, I have to get this one for him. And it is turning into a series that is going to be on Netflix, movie or series that's going to be on Netflix this year. But then we usually give you official dates, but it's probably going to be sometime this late spring. So here we've got, before he was the Gray Man, Court Gentry was Sierra 6, a junior member of the CIA action team. In their first mission, they took out a terrorist leader at a terrible price. And years have passed. The Gray Man is on a simple mission. When he sees a ghost, the long dead terrorist, but he's remarkably energetic for a dead man. A decade of time hasn't changed the gray man. He isn't one to leave a job unfinished or a blood debt unpaid. So this will be one he will be diving into. It was really funny because this week Reacher started airing on Netflix, and my husband is notorious for not watching anything that has episodes. And I'm like, but it's fine. You just flip from one to the next. So we watched one episode of Reacher, and he goes, I think I could do two, which is like, he usually doesn't do two in a night. And last night he goes, you know what? I think I could watch three, and then I'd only have, and I was just laughing because I couldn't believe that this is how obsessed he is with the show. He says, just sounds here like, let's watch Reacher. I'm like, how have I watched the Olympics? No, Reacher won. So I can see him being exactly the same thing with Mark Greaney's Gray Man. Next, we've got The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, and we know Lucy Foley as the author of The Guest List. So this is on sale on February 22nd. Jess needs a fresh start. She's broken alone, and she's just left her job under less than ideal circumstances. Her half-brother Ben doesn't sound thrilled when she asked if she could crash with him for a bit, but he didn't say no, and surely everything will look better from Paris. Only when he shows up to find a very nice apartment, could Ben really have afforded this? He's not there. The longer Ben stays missing, the more Jess starts to dig into her brother's situation, and the more questions she has. Ben's neighbors are an eclectic bunch and not particularly friendly. Jess may have come to Paris to escape her past, but it's starting to look like Ben's future is the part that's in question. The socialite, the nice guy, the alcoholic, the girl on the verge, the concierge. Everybody's a neighbor. Everyone's a suspect, and everyone knows something they're not telling. So this is going to be a locked-in mystery, but hey, we're stuck in a Paris apartment. What could be bad about that? Doesn't look particular. I'll take the second floor with the balcony. Next, we've got The Silent Sisters from Robert Dugari. It is coming on February 22nd. After Herring escaped from Russian agents on his last mission, Charles Jenkins thinks he's finally done with the spy game. But then the final two of the seven sisters, American assets who've been deep undercover in Russia for decades, cut off all communication with their handlers. Are they hiding after detecting surveillance, or have they turned into and become double agents? It's Jenkins' duty to find out, and he's been added to a Russian kill list, so it will require all of his knowledge of spycraft and array of disguises to return to the country undetected. But plans go awry his first night in Moscow when Jenkins gets involved in an altercation. Pursued by mafia henchmen, Russian agents, and a particularly dogged Moscow police detective, he's determined to track down the final two sisters and get them to America or die trying. So he was there last time to get somebody out of a deep prison. This time we've got a little bit different story. Next, we've got from Rosie Walsh, The Love of My Life. It's coming on March 1st. Emma loves her husband, Leo, and their young daughter, Ruby. Almost everything she's told them about herself is a lie. And she just might have gotten away with it if it weren't for her husband's job. Leo is an obituary writer. Emma, a well-known marine biologist. When she suffers a serious illness, Leo copes by doing what he does best, researching about his wife's life. But as he starts to unravel the truth, he discovers the woman he loves doesn't really exist. Even her name isn't real. When the darkest moments of Emma's past finally emerge, she must somehow prove to Leo that she really is the woman he always thought she was. But first, she must tell him about the other love of her life. So there we've got Rosie Walsh, The Love of My Life. And Laura Dave said, my favorite kind of thriller, gripping, heartbreaking, and impossible to put down. And we all know what Laura Dave's book was like that last year. Do some memoirs, biographies, and nonfiction. First, from Chet Klosterman, we've got The 90s, a book. And the fact that we're writing about the 90s like it's something like a time frame that we really should be studying is alone something I want to have a thought about. Actually, somebody said the other day that 1972 was as far from 1918 as 1972 is to now. Ponder that for a second, folks. It's a little scary. But in 1972, we were thinking back on 1918. I mean, it's just like crazy to sit and think about. So it was long ago and not as long as it seems. The Berlin Wall fell and the Twin Towers collapsed, which actually happened in 2001. But like, okay, we'll stretch a little bit. In between, one presidential election was allegedly decided by Ross Perot, while another was plausibly decided by Ralph Nader. In the beginning, almost every name and address was listed in a phone book. Remember the phone book? Remember you used to look for the phone book? Remember when I was with boys were in school, they give me a directory of all the parents' names in a phone book. Now I guess they just give you an email with a spreadsheet attached. And everyone answered their landlines because you didn't know who it was. Remember when we didn't get spam calls all day long? Remember then the only people that we could be calling that were wrong were the people calling the wrong number? Yeah, those days. By the end, exposing someone's address was an act of emotional violence, and nobody picked up their new cell phone if they didn't know who it was. The 90s brought about a revolution in the human condition we're still groping to understand. Happily, Chuck Klosterman is more than up to the job. You've got to think about it. A site like ours started in 1996. And why did we start? Because there was not a lot of information online about authors. And we wanted to get people to know the authors behind the books. And just think how much the world has changed. You often will know what your favorite author ate for dinner last night and what they're eating for breakfast this morning. It really changed a lot. Used to be like, him and his dog live in San Francisco. Okay, now I've got Coach K, The Rise and Reign of Mike Krzyzewski by Ian O'Connor. What's important about this book is he is retiring this year. So this book is coming out on February 22nd. There'll be much hoopla about basketball and the Final Four and the Sweet 16 in March. And people will be talking about the fact that he is retiring. He's known as Coach K. He's a 5-time national champion at Duke, the NCAA's top leader in victories with nearly 1,200 and the first man to lead Team USA to 3 Olympic basketball gold medals. Through unprecedented access to his best friends, his close advisors, fiercest adversaries, and generations of his players and assistants, New York Times bestselling author Ian O'Connor takes you behind the Blue Devil curtain with a penetrating examination of the great but flawed leader as he closes out his iconic career. And he used scores of interviews with those who know him best to deliver previously untold stories about the relationships that define the venerable Coach K. So as you hear about basketball going forward, you all know the book to recommend to people to read. See, got you on top of everything here at Bookaccino Live. And speaking of, we've got Scoundrel from Serie. Is coming on February 22nd. In the 1960s, Edgar Smith, imprisoned and sentenced to death for the murder of a teenage Victoria Zielinski, strikes up correspondence with William F. Buckley, the founder of the National Review. Buckley, who refused to believe that a man who supported the neoconservative movement could have committed such a heinous crime, began to advocate not only for Smith's life to be spared, but also for his sentence to be overturned. So begins a bizarre and tragic trail of mid-century America. Sarah's Scoundrel leads us through the twists of fate and fortune that brought Smith to freedom, book deals, fame, and eventually to attempting murder again. In Smith, Weinman has uncovered a psychopath who slipped his way into public acclaim and acceptance before crashing down to earth once again. So there we've got Scoundrel. She's a really good writer. Next, from Margaret Atwood, we've got Essays and Occasional Pieces from 2004 to 2021. And these are burning questions. So in Burning Questions, on sale on March 1st, Margaret Atwood offers her funny, erudite, endlessly curious, and uncanny prescient take on everything from debt and tech to the climate crisis and freedom and the importance of how to define granola. That'll be interesting. And seeks answers to burning questions of, why do people everywhere in all cultures tell stories? How much of yourself can you give away without evaporating? How can we live on our planet? Is it true and is it fair? What do zombies have in common, have to do with authoritarianism? In more than 50 pieces, Atwood aims her prodigious intellect and impish humor at the world and reports back to us on what she finds. And that's definitely an impish face right there on Margaret Atwood. So there's some April titles to look forward to, which we always promise you to put 2 months out. First, we've got The Lifeguards from Amanda Ayer Ward. She wrote a book called The Jet Setters, her last one. She was another one that was one of our last interviews in the office. I really enjoyed The Jet Setters. So this is coming on April 5th. Austin's Zyker Park and neighborhood is a wonderland of greenbelt trails, live music, and moms who drink a few too many margaritas. Whitney, Annette, and Liza have grown thick as thieves as they raise their children together for 15 years, believing that they can shelter them from an increasingly dangerous world. Their friendship is unbreakable, as safe as the neighborhood where they've raised their sweet boys, or so they think. One night, the three women have been enjoying happy hour when their boys, lifeguards for the summer, come back on bicycles for a late night dip in their favorite swimming hole. The boys share a secret, news that will shatter the perfect world their mothers have so painstakingly created. There we've got the lifeguards. Next, we got Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow, also coming on April 5th. It's summer 1995, and 10-year-old Joan, her mother, and her younger sister flee her father's explosive temper and seek refuge at her mother's ancestral home in Memphis. This is not the first time violence has altered the course of the family's trajectory. Half a century earlier, Joan's grandfather built this majestic house in the historic Black neighborhood of Douglas, only to be lynched days after becoming the first Black detective in the city. Joan tries to settle into her new life, but family secrets cast a long shadow, longer than expected. As she grows up, Joan finds relief in her artwork, painting portraits of the community of Memphis. One of her subjects is their enigmatic neighbor, Miss Dawn, who claims to know something about curses, and whose stories about the past help Joan see how her passion, imagination, and relentless hope are, in fact, the continuation of a long matrilineal tradition. So there we've got Memphis. Next, we've got Sister Stardust by Jane Green, and I've been hearing great stuff about this. Laura Dave here said it's wonderful and big-hearted, expansive and page-turning, a joy to read. So on April 5th, this will be out. From afar, to leave this life seems perfect. She's in her 20s, an already famous model and actress. She moved from London to a palace in Marrakesh with her husband, Paul Getty, the famous oil heir. There she presided over a swilling expat scene filled with music, art, free love, and a counterculture taking root across the world. Claire arrives in London from her small town. She never expected to cross paths with a woman as magnetic as Talitha Getty. Yearning for the adventure and independence, she's swept off to Marrakesh, where the two become kindred spirits. But beneath Talitha's glamorous facade lurks a darkness few can understand. As their friendship blossoms and the two grow closer together, the realities of Talitha's precarious existence set off a chain of dangerous events that could alter Claire's life forever. So I love this is about one of the Gettys, because you know it's going to be some kind of dark, swirly story just from everything we know about them. Okay, Anna Quinlan, who's written Lots of Candles and Plenty of Cake, is back with Write for Your Life. It's coming on April 12th. So what really matters in life, what truly lasts in our hearts and our minds? Where can we find community, history, humanity? This lyrical new book, the answer is clear: through writing. This is the book that Anna Quinlan calls Civilians, those who want to write the word, become more human, more themselves. Write for Your Life argues that there's never been a more important time to stop and record what we are thinking and feeling. Using for examples from the past, present, and future, from Anne Frank to Toni Morrison, from love letters written in World War II to journal reflections from nurses and doctors today, the book vividly illuminates the way in which writing connects us to ourselves and to those we cherish. So drawing on her personal experiences, not just as a writer, but as a mother or daughter, she makes the case that recording our daily lives and writing is essential. And this is something I've talked to audiences at Bookaccino Live about more than once, is where are we writing down how we really feel? Is it these random emails that you're going to have that email address to someday pull those stories back up? Where is our history being saved these days? Are the stack of Christmas cards that are like this big compared to the way it used to be like this? Where are we telling our stories and where we're talking about our lives? And I think it's something that I've been thinking about a lot more these days, because everything just seems so fluid, so on the fly, and where are we leaving for people to learn about us later behind? From James Rollins, we've got Kingdom of Bones. Last time I think we talked to you about a fantasy book that he wrote, and this one is one of his thrillers. It's coming on April 19th. A United Nations relief team in a small village in the Congo makes an alarming discovery. Men, women, and children have been reduced to a dull, catatonic state. The environment surrounding them, plants and animals, have grown more cunning and predatory, evolving at an exponential pace. This insidious phenomenon is spreading from a cursed site in the jungle, known to the locals as Kingdom of Bones, and sweeping across Africa, threatening the rest of the world. What has made the biosphere run amok? Is it a natural event, or more terrifying, did someone engineer it? Commander Gray Pierce and Sigma Force are prepared for the extraordinary and have kept the world safe. Yet even these brilliant and seasoned scientific warriors do not understand what's behind this frightening development or know how to stop it. As they race to find answers, the member of Sigma quickly realize they have become the prey. So there we've got Kingdom of Bones. Next from Don Winslow, we've got City on Fire. It's best-selling author of The Border and the Force. This book was held, it was supposed to be out in the fall. And he held it back because he felt like this was a book he really wanted to be able to tour to small bookstores and go talk to readers about. And in the fall, as you know, was not a time that was going to be able to happen. He actually wrote this book very close to the town where he grew up. Like it was in the town he grew up with. His mother was dying as he was writing this book, and he carried on writing it after her death. So it's an area that he knows really well, going back to the East Coast to write this. So here's what we've got. This first book of a trilogy. Two criminal empires together control all of New England until a beautiful modern-day Helen of Troy comes between the Irish and the Italians, launching a war that will see them kill each other, destroy an alliance, and set a city on fire. Danny Ryan earns for a more legit life and a place in the sun. But as a bloody conflict stacks body on body and brother turns against brother, Danny has to rise above himself. To save the friends he loves, family, and the family he is sworn to protect, he becomes a leader, a ruthless strategist, and a master of a treacherous game in which winners live and losers die. From the gritty streets of Providence to the glittering screens of Hollywood, the golden casinos of Las Vegas, Danny Ryan will forge a dynasty. So this is book one of a trilogy. Next, we have Adriana Krajani's The Good Left Undone. This is coming on April 26th. Matilda, the Cabrelli family's matriarch, has always been brusque and opinionated. Now, as she faces the end of her life, she's determined to share a long-held secret with her family about her own mother's great love story with her childhood friend, Silvio, and with the dashing Scottish sea captain, John Lowry McVickers, the father Matilda never knew. Domenica Cabrelli thrives in the coastal town of Viareggio until her beloved home becomes unsafe when Italy teeters on the brink of World War II. Her journey takes her from Marseille to Scotland to wartime Liverpool, where Italian Scots are imprisoned without cause. This is something that Adriana learned during her research, as Domenica experiences love, loss, and grief while she longs for home. 100 years later, her daughter Matilda and her granddaughter Anina face the same big questions about life and their family legacy, while Matilda contemplates what is worth fighting for. So there we've got The Good Left Undone. And Delia Efron says, Trigiani's storytelling is genius. Next, we've got The Puzzler by A.J. Jacobs. A.J. Jacobs is that guy who did The Year of Living Biblically. He will always take on some kind of a challenge of what to do. And this is one man's quest to solve the most baffling puzzles ever, from crosswords to jigsaws to the meaning of life. It's coming on April 26th. What makes puzzles, jigsaw, mazes, riddles, Sudoku, wordly, can we say, so satisfying? A.J. Jacobs, New York Times bestselling author, master of immersion journalism, and yes, immersion journalism is what he does, a nightly crossworder, set out to determine their myriad benefits, and maybe in the process, solve a puzzle of our very existence. Well, almost. In The Puzzler, Jacobs meets the almost zealous devotees, enters sometimes with his family in tow, and he has got to have the most patient wife for all the things that she's been put through in all these books. Any puzzle competition that will have him unpacks the history of the most popular puzzles and aims to solve the most impossible head scratchers, from a mutant Rubik's Cube to the hardest corn maze in America to the most sadistic jigsaw. So this is what AJ will definitely form his life around. And you see him like on top of the Rubik's Cube answering a crossword puzzle. So perfect. So that will be totally fun because it's just the way AJ appreciates life. These are what we've picked on. I've picked so far as early book reporter bets on selections. So we've got Olga Dies Dreaming, The Last House on the Street, The Maid, Greenwich Park, and The Overnight Guest. And when we're back on the first slide, I forgot to mention that Last House on the Street was also a bets on, I fear, but all very different. I will say that like we've got some, I think 4 thrillers, but there's some other bent to them as well. There's other parts of them that I'm absolutely crazy about. So we are beginning. Also this week in the newsletter, we're going to picture a picture of the woman who run all 44 of my Bets On selections last year. They arrived and she's got a great picture with them. So that will be in the newsletter on Friday. Also, these are some of the recent Book Reporter video podcasts that we've done with Wendy, Corsi, Staub, Heather Goodenkoff. Tom Austin did an interview about Road of Bones with Christopher Austin. I'm forgetting his last name. Can you jump on and just give me his last name because I'm forgetting?
Yes, Christopher Golden.
Christopher Golden. And then we talked to Catherine Faulkner about Greenwich Park. We talked to Anita Prose about The Maid, and Austin also took on James Rollins talking about The Starless Crown. So Austin, as I said, has been doing really a terrific job at the genres that I'm not as well schooled in, that he's well schooled in. And it's fun for me to just introduce the show and then turn it over to him. But each one of these interviews has been so interesting. And I highly encourage, if you haven't had a chance to listen to them, do that. We're up to, I think it was 2,200 subscribers to our YouTube channel, which we're really excited about. And our podcasts were downloaded a record number last month. So we're excited about that as well. Next up for our Bookaccino Live event, you really want to attend this event. First of all, because Lisa Scottolini is so much fun to talk to. And secondly, because Eternal is such a terrific book. It's a book that takes place during World War II, and we hear what happened with the fascist regime in Italy, something that we have not heard a lot about. If you haven't picked up the book yet, highly recommend you read it and join us on Wednesday, February 23rd at 8 p.m. Also, if you'd like to ask Lisa a question on screen about the book, shoot me a note and just tell me what your question is. The format of this usually goes, the format is, I will interview Lisa with some questions. We'll go to some audience questions on camera. And for those that are more shy, you will be able to answer your questions via Austin through the Q&A down below, as Austin becomes our voice of God asking Lisa the questions. But it's your opportunity to be, one-on-one having a chat with an author at the same time. So highly encourage you to do this. If you're in a book group and you want your whole book group to join you, absolutely great, get signed up. Okay, so we've got that. And we've got a really terrific guest I'm not going to share with you right now, coming on Wednesday, March 23rd at 8 p.m. So if you want to just pencil in your calendar with author to come, book to come, we'll have information on that very soon for you. And our next Bookaccino Live event, where we'll do March 8th to April 5th, will be on Wednesday, March 9th. The nice part about February, when it's not a leap year, is it's got 28 days. So it's really easy to do the calendar. I can make you guys be really smart. Anytime the date is, if it's a Wednesday in March, it's going to be February, it's going to be a Wednesday in March. Now you're all geniuses. So thanks everyone for joining us today for Bookaccino Live. We so enjoy having these sessions once a month with our readers. I want to thank Caroline Folk, who works with us. She's our new intern, did a fabulous job of putting together the slides today. To Tom Donadio, who has looked at every slide and made sure that everything ran flawlessly today. And to our producer, Austin Rue, without whom these things would never come together as seamlessly as they do. So I'm going to ask Tom Donadio now to jump on stage with us and answer some questions. And to everyone, we look forward to seeing you next time on Bookaccino Live.